So let's jump into the lecture then. And we will start by looking at a couple learning goals. Okay, so today I want you to understand what deontologism is, in particular Kantian deontologism, and how it differs from utilitarianism and divine command theory. Secondly, I want you to be able to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the view. So you should be able to articulate at least one major objection and maybe even a major benefit of the view in contrast to some of the other ones that we've considered. And then finally, I want you to be able to formulate some sort of response to the hard cases for deontologism. So the hard cases are, deontologism entails things like it's never okay in any circumstances to tell a lie. And so, of course, philosophers come up with counterexamples and they say, oh, well, what about this one, right? What if either you lie or the whole world is going to be just totally like blown up? And you think like, well, surely you should lie there. Deontologism says never lie. So I want to see if you can formulate a response on behalf of the deontologist for those kinds of cases. We're also going to focus right at the end of class in our small group activity and then the large group activity that we do when we come back together. We're going to focus on ethics sort of in general, evaluating ethical views in general, because we're now leaving the official ethics unit. And so I want you to be able to kind of speak fluently about ethical theories, comparing them and sort of talking about their structure and that sort of thing. So that's what we're going to focus on in our activities. Okay, good. So here's how deontologism compares structurally with the other theories that we've looked at so far. Okay, so just remember all the way on the left, you have the structure of ethical theories in general. What's the ultimate good? What constitutes right action? And what are principles for deciding what constitutes right action? And then what, according to that view, would a good life look like? So we looked at utilitarianism, we looked at divine command theory, and now we're looking at deontologism. Deontologism, at least the way that we're talking about it here, it's a little bit more abstract, a little bit harder to grasp. Hopefully you found the readings enlightening and the videos. That should have given you like more of a grip on it. But we're going to spell out in a little bit more detail the role of, for instance, agency in the view, and then what exactly is meant by duty and how we figure out what our duties are. So deontologism's answers to our big theoretical questions are that the ultimate good is agential integrity, and that right action is action that's in accord with duty. So let's kind of define some of these terms here for the purposes of our class. Agency is an abstract word. It's a word we're all familiar with, but let's like nail it down a little bit. Agency is the thing that we exercise through acting in the world. For Kant, for a lot of people, it's a uniquely human capacity or ability to reflectively bring about changes in the world, right? So agency, in this philosophical sense, is the thing that people do when they look out at the world, reflect on how they want things to be, and then exert their will on the world, right? So you can kind of get a grasp for this by appreciating distinctions that people typically make between, say, humans and animals, right? It might be the case that some animals have agency, but for the most part, and definitely for Kant, humans are paradigmatic agents, whereas animals are what he would call patients, right? Animals look out at the world and they sort of act on instinct. They see how things are and they react to those things, but they don't self-consciously reflect on the way that the world is, and they certainly don't reflectively decide to bring about changes in the world. So agency for Kant is a huge deal. It's a uniquely human capacity, and in many ways, it grounds or explains what's so distinctively valuable about human beings. Duties or obligations we have some of these simply in virtue of possessing agency, right? So duties are the obligations that we have. They take the form of imperatives for Kant, right? Do this. They're sort of like ethical commands. And it's important to note that some of these are things that we have simply in virtue of possessing agency. And the way that we're going to spell out happiness for Kant is as follows. Happiness is when a human agent is in total harmony with herself and her community. We'll spell that out in a little bit more detail in just a second. But first, let's talk about Kant's actual ethical view. Okay, so Kant thinks the ultimate good here is total agential integrity, right? And he thinks that an integrated agent, a fully integrated agent, is going to be a happy agent. So what does this mean? Well, let's get a grip on it by thinking about a disintegrated agent, or an agent who's not in what we might call inner harmony, right? So somebody who acts duplicitously, right? They say one thing and then they do another. Or they're self-deceived. They think that what they really want is this one thing, when in reality, maybe they have these deeper desires, maybe they're even hidden from themselves, they don't really understand what they want, etc. They're disintegrated as an agent, right? They act from mixed motives. This creates, according to Kant, a kind of disharmony, an inner disharmony or disintegration, and it's unpleasant. It makes you unhappy, right? If you can't act in the world as an agent in a straightforward way, you're not going to be an integrated, holistic, harmonious agent. So happiness is kind of inner harmony, and this comes from acting in accord with your duty in all circumstances. It also, we should say, so in the reading for today, you encountered this idea of a will that acts in accord with duty all the time, right? So the will, the human will for Kant is very important. It's sort of, in a way, the locus of human agency, and it's the thing that needs to be in harmony in order for people to be happy. Okay. So what more specifically for Kant are our duties and where do they come from? Again, in the video for today, we talked about, they talked about the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative commands you to follow morality regardless of your desires, right? These are commands that you have to follow regardless of your desires. And these are moral obligations that are supposed to be derived from pure reason. So in the video, he mentioned that Kant in some ways wants to separate the domains of religion and morality. It's not that they have nothing to do with each other. It's not that none of our religious obligations could in some way affect our moral obligations. Instead, his point is just this: if we're looking for the source or basis of morality, we don't have to look to divine authority. We don't have to look to the nature of God or anything like that. Instead, we should be able to reach the categorical imperative purely on the basis of reason, just by thinking about what it is to be a human agent and what that requires of us in terms of moral obligations and duties towards others. So categorical imperatives are the source of moral duties, and then the formulations of it, the specific formulations of it that Kant gives, these are kinds of tools that are used to determine more specifically what those duties are or how you ought to act in a particular case. So in the video, and I believe in the reading, we mentioned at least two of them. I'm just going to go through one in a little bit more detail to refresh your memory. This is the universalizability formula. And according to the universalizability formula, you should act in a way so that what Kant calls your maxim could be totally universalized, could be realized universally. Every sort of true description of why you're doing a particular thing should be applicable to every human agent without there being some sort of bad consequences on a large scale, right? So in order to figure out how to use this formula in actually determining what you ought to do, you first have to figure out how to accurately describe your actions and why you're doing what you're doing. Then you have to ask this question, can it be universalized? If the answer is yes, then it's in accord with duty and you can do it. If the answer is no, then it's not in accord with duty and you can't do it, no matter the consequences. So as our example, take lying. You might think, well, look, I should tell a lie in this particular circumstance because if I lie, people stand to benefit more than if I tell the truth. Okay. But for Kant, telling a lie to bring about benefit to myself and those around me, that would be the maxim that you're acting on. That would be the description of your action that's relevant here. Kant would say, think about what would happen if everybody adopted that maxim. Everybody in the world, right? Everybody in the world thought, okay, whenever I'm in a circumstance where I stand to benefit and the people around me stand to benefit more if I tell a lie than if I tell the truth, so I'm going to lie. If everybody reasoned that way, Kant says, then our whole social system would just totally fall apart. There would be no trust whatsoever. The world would be much worse off, right? Because we would all know that whenever somebody told us something, if they stood to benefit, they were probably lying, right? So we wouldn't trust people. So we wouldn't even be able to assert things to each other. We wouldn't even be able to say, look, trust me, just do this thing. Because in the background, we'd always be saying, well, look, everybody lies in order to benefit themselves and those people around them. So this is the way in which Kant hopes to answer that question. What is it that you ought to do in particular circumstances? How do you determine the right thing to do? Okay. There's a couple other formulations of the categorical imperative. We won't go into those in class, but I will just mention one other one. So Kant thinks that the categorical imperative can be formulated as follows: never treat humanity in yourself or in another as a mere means and not also as an ends, right? So this distinction between mere means and ends, sort of like this. If Peter was standing next to me and I was just like, man, I got this drink in my hand and I don't want to hold it anymore. I'm tired of holding it. Oh, I know. Peter's standing right here. I'll just make Peter hold it for me forever, right? I would be treating Peter as a means, right? Because I have some end, not wanting to hold my drink anymore. And Peter can serve as the means for my realizing that end, right? Now here's the trick. If I also treat Peter as an end, if I say, Peter, I know that you're not just a drink holder, you're a great guy, you're a doctor of philosophy, you're a gentleman and a scholar of metaphysics, and then I say, will you please hold my drink for me? I would be treating him as a means, but also as an end. I'd be respecting his humanity or his human dignity, right? Whereas if I just somehow conscripted Peter into holding my drink, I was like, Peter, you're nothing but a drink holder to me. Hold this drink, you gotta do it. I'm making you do it. Then I would be treating him as a mere means, right? Kant says that is never okay. You can never treat people as a mere means. So that's another formulation of the categorical imperative, another way of trying to figure out whether your maxim is in accord with duty and whether the particular action you're considering is something that you can do in a morally permissible way. Okay. That should help us get a little bit clearer on what Kant thinks is the grounds of all this morality, right? And that is a deep or ultimate respect for humanity in ourselves and in others, and in particular, a deep or ultimate respect in human agency. So Kant just thinks, he is just so impressed by this distinctively human capacity to act in the world reflectively and to even consider these sorts of moral considerations and reasoning, he thinks this can serve as the basis of all morality. Okay, so let's talk really briefly about a couple of objections to deontologism. One, there's just these moral hard cases, right? We talked about cases where lying would save someone's life, right? Or even lying would save 1,000 people's lives, right? It just seems like there have got to be exceptions to some of these moral absolutes. Now, this is the exact opposite sort of consideration that we had for utilitarianism, right? So utilitarianism said, look, just do what has the best consequences. And we said, well, surely there are some moral absolutes in the world, right? Thou shalt not kill or something. Whereas for deontologism, now a lot of people think, well, okay, maybe there are some moral absolutes, but if we get too many moral absolutes, and if they're too fine-grained, and if they include things like never lying, this might make the ethical theory implausible or less plausible. Okay. You might also wonder why it is that Kant thinks we can never treat human beings as mere means. Even if you have the intuition, yeah, that's right, you should never treat somebody as a mere means, you have to explain it somehow. And you might think that human agency isn't the only or the best way to do that, right? So if you think about, say, Christian ethics, human dignity is of fundamental value, but it's not just because we're agents or we're capable of acting or something like that. It's because human agents are created in the image of God, right? So here's a deeper explanation about why humanity is valuable, why human dignity has to be respected. And it's not clear that there's something that can play that role, that explanatory role in Kantian deontologism. Maybe agency can do it, but it's at least not clear. So we'd at least have to sort of think a lot harder about that. Okay. So I'm going to conclude then with the following point. And this is going to make the discussion a bit broader. Okay, so look, we've been talking about the structure of different ethical theories, right? We talked about utilitarianism, divine command theory, deontologism. You might think about these ethical theories in two different ways. One, they're supposed to give us all the ethical truths. They're supposed to tell us what our obligations, our duties, our responsibilities are, and why, et cetera. They're supposed to sort of, in a way, be like a mathematical system or something. They're supposed to like give us the truths in the domain of ethics or morality. But a lot of people think that ethical theories also have a practical element, that they should actually tell us how to live, that they should be action guiding in a way, or that they should give us, the tools to decide what the right thing to do is. So in the second half of class, after we do our in-class debates, we're going to shift to this question, and we're going to see if we can come up with practical ways of implementing any of these ethical theories, right? So that's what we'll be doing in our activities. And that is going to, for the most part, conclude our official consideration of ethics. Like I said, we'll be talking about virtue ethics a bit in the context of the last unit. But overall, that concludes our ethics unit.